There's a moment a lot of people have, usually late at night, where they open their bank app, stare at whatever number is there, and honestly don't know whether they should feel relieved or a little panicked. The number isn't terrible, but it's not exactly comforting either. And what's weird is that this feeling doesn't automatically disappear when you get a raise. It doesn't magically vanish when you move into a nicer apartment or start earning more money. For a lot of Americans, it just quietly follows them from paycheck to paycheck and income level to income level, almost like a shadow that changes size depending on how much they make. And that's the part nobody really tells you. The feeling of being financially behind usually isn't just about the number sitting in your account. It's about the behavior underneath that number. And most people never slow down long enough to really look at what that behavior is. My name is Daniel, and I've spent an uncomfortable amount of time paying attention to what financially stable people actually do differently. Not the polished advice people casually throw out at dinner, and not the fake online version of wealth where everything looks perfect from the outside, but the quiet habits that separate someone who sleeps peacefully from someone who's doing mental math at 2 in the morning. So in this video, I want to walk through 15 signs that you're doing better financially than you probably think. Not as some self-congratulatory checklist, but more like a mirror, because a lot of people assume they're doing fine just because they've normalized financial stress. And the reality is, the average standard is a lot shakier than most people realize. The first sign is that you have a cash buffer that has nothing to do with your monthly bills. Most people keep money in their checking account until it disappears, and they call that managing their finances. But there's a different kind of person who keeps a separate pool of money that isn't already mentally assigned to rent, groceries, the car payment, or anything else. It just sits there. And on the surface, that can feel like your money is doing nothing, but in reality, it's doing something incredibly valuable. It's buying you time to think clearly when life gets messy. That kind of buffer means a surprise expense doesn't immediately become a credit card problem. It means one bad week doesn't turn into 3 bad months, and that kind of financial breathing room is a lot rarer than people think. The second sign is that you're contributing something toward retirement, even if it feels painfully small. There's a certain kind of guilt that comes with putting away $50 or $100 a month while feeling like you should be doing way more. But here's the thing. A lot of people aren't behind by a little. They've never started at all. Zero. Nothing. And that difference matters more than people give it credit for. Because once you really understand compound growth, you realize this isn't just about how much you contribute. It's about how early the habit starts. $200 a month started at 25 and $200 a month started at 35 are not even remotely the same outcome. The amount might look identical on paper, but time changes everything. So even if your contribution feels small right now, the habit itself is doing more work than it seems. The third sign is that your credit card balance goes to zero every month. That sounds basic, but it really isn't. A lot of people use credit cards in a way that feels normal because it's common, but common does not mean healthy. Carrying a balance and paying interest every month is one of those things that slowly destroys financial progress without creating much immediate panic, which is exactly why it traps so many people. At a high interest rate, debt stops being just debt. It becomes this invisible leak in your life where money keeps disappearing into something you already bought months ago. So if you use a credit card and pay the statement balance in full every single month, that matters. You're using a system that is built to make money off people who slip, and you're not slipping. The fourth sign is that you have at least some money invested in the market. I'm not talking about chasing hot stocks, obsessing over market corrections, or checking an app 10 times a day. I mean simple, boring, long-term investing. Just money sitting there in something like an index fund, quietly compounding while you go live your life. A shocking number of people still have zero market exposure of any kind. No retirement account, no brokerage account, nothing. Which means the only thing building their financial future is their labor. And that's a brutally slow way to build wealth. Look, hard work matters, obviously, but wealthy people don't build financial security from labor alone. They build it from labor plus assets. And the moment even a small part of your money starts working without your direct effort, you're operating differently from a huge portion of the population. The fifth sign is that you save more than 10% of what you earn. This is one of those habits that doesn't feel dramatic in real time, which is exactly why people underestimate it. Saving 15% instead of 4% doesn't usually feel like this giant lifestyle difference on a random Tuesday. You don't wake up every morning feeling the missing 10%, but over time, that gap becomes enormous. It becomes flexibility, peace, options, and eventually a completely different future. The crazy part is that most people don't destroy their future through one huge financial mistake. They do it through small percentages repeated year after year. So if your savings rate is already above what most people are doing, that matters a lot more than it seems. The sixth sign is that your total assets are greater than your total debts. Again, this sounds obvious until you realize how many people don't meet this standard. A lot of households, especially younger ones, are technically in the red. If they sold everything and paid everything off, they'd still owe money. That is more common than people think. So if your net worth is positive, even if it's modest, even if it feels underwhelming, it still means something important. It means you're moving in the right direction. And in personal finance, direction matters more than people want to admit, because a small positive number that keeps growing is not small in the long run. If you're getting value out of this, subscribe. Seriously, it takes 2 seconds, it helps the channel a lot, and it lets me keep making this kind of content. Now let's keep going, because some of the next signs are where people really start to see themselves clearly. The seventh sign is that your car is not quietly wrecking your finances. This one gets ignored all the time because car payments have become so normalized that people barely question them anymore. But a lot of Americans are spending a shocking amount of money every month just to drive something decent. And the real issue isn't just the payment, it's the full chain reaction around it. Bigger payment, higher insurance, more expensive repairs, more pressure on every other category in your budget. And then, because it's all spread out monthly, it doesn't always feel severe enough to trigger alarm. It just keeps you tight all the time. So if your transportation costs are reasonable, if your car isn't eating up a ridiculous share of your take-home pay, you're likely in a stronger position than you realize. The eighth sign is that you actually know where your money goes. Not roughly, not emotionally, not based on what you think you probably spend. I mean, you actually know. You've looked at the numbers, you've gone line by line, you've seen the little leaks that don't feel dangerous in the moment, but add up fast. Most people don't do that, they guess, and the problem with guessing is that modern spending is designed to stay invisible. Tiny subscriptions, impulse purchases, convenient spending, random online orders, all of it slips by because none of it feels serious alone. But together, that's where a lot of financial stress comes from. So if you know your actual numbers, that's not obsessive, that's protection. The ninth sign is that your credit score is above 750. People hear that and think it's just bragging rights or some meaningless number, but it's not. A strong credit score changes the price of your financial life. It affects what you pay for borrowed money, what terms you get, what options are open to you, and how expensive basic milestones become. Two people can buy the same house, finance the same car, and live in the same city, but one ends up paying far more just because of their credit profile. So if your score is strong, it means your habits are strong too. And that matters because good financial behavior tends to show up in clusters. The 10th sign is that you understand the basic rules of how money grows. Not every advanced technical detail, not every tax strategy, not every niche investing framework, just the fundamentals. You understand compounding, you understand the cost of high-interest debt, you understand the difference between saving and investing, you understand what certain accounts are actually for. That alone puts you ahead of more people than it should, because a lot of financial mistakes don't happen because people are lazy. They happen because people genuinely don't understand the machine they're standing inside. And if you understand the basics, you stop making decisions blindly. That matters more than people think. The 11th sign is that you have protection against catastrophic loss. This is the boring part of financial planning that almost nobody gets excited about. Insurance isn't sexy. Disability coverage isn't fun to think about. Life insurance feels like something people avoid until they're forced to deal with it. But real financial stability is not just about growth, it's also about protection. It's about making sure one terrible event doesn't erase years of progress.
And the people who handle this stuff early usually look boring right up until the moment life goes sideways. Then suddenly they look smart. So if you've already dealt with that side of the equation, that's a real sign of maturity.
The 12th sign is that medical care is a decision you make, not something you avoid because you know it will wreck your finances. This one is heavier than people realize. A lot of people delay care, skip appointments, ignore symptoms, or push off treatment, not because they don't care, but because they're afraid of what it will cost. And that creates this vicious cycle where financial stress damages physical health, and physical health problems create even more financial stress later. So if you can handle a medical bill without instantly going into crisis mode, that's not small. That's a form of stability millions of people still don't have. The 13th sign is that you earn money from more than one place. Now, that doesn't mean you need some huge side hustle empire. It doesn't mean you need rental properties, a course, a consulting business, and 3 streams of passive income just to feel like you're doing okay. It can be small. The important part is that the second stream is additive. It's not there just to keep you afloat. It's helping you build. It's making your savings grow faster, your investing easier, or your margin a little wider. Because the moment your life stops depending on one single source of money, your entire financial position becomes less fragile. The 14th sign is that your spending did not rise perfectly with your income. This is a huge one because lifestyle creep is sneaky. It rarely shows up as one reckless decision. It shows up as a nicer apartment here, a better car there, slightly more expensive habits everywhere, and then one day you realize you make way more than you used to and somehow still feel tight. That's the trap. More income should create more margin, but for a lot of people it just creates more expensive stress. So if your savings rate stayed strong as your income grew, or if the gap between what you earn and what you spend got wider instead of staying the same, that's a real sign you're doing something right. And the 15th sign is probably the one that says the most. You could survive financially if your paycheck stopped tomorrow. Not forever, obviously, that's not the standard. The real question is whether losing your primary income would instantly become a crisis, or whether it would become a problem you have time to solve. There's a huge difference between those two things. A crisis destroys clear thinking. A problem still gives you options. So if you've built enough savings, enough resilience, enough flexibility that one missed paycheck would not immediately send everything into chaos, you've built something very meaningful. Maybe not perfect safety, but real breathing room. And breathing room changes everything. Here's the honest conclusion. None of these 15 signs require you to be rich. They don't require some magical income level where life suddenly becomes easy. What they require is a pattern, a way of operating. Small, boring decisions repeated consistently, often for a long time, with no applause and no immediate visible reward. That's what most people miss. Financial stability usually doesn't come from one brilliant move. It comes from refusing the default settings, the default car payment, the default debt, the default savings rate, the default habit of telling yourself you'll get serious later. People who end up stable usually aren't the ones doing flashy things. They're the ones who started doing the boring things before they felt urgent. And that's really the point of this whole video. A lot of people think they're behind because they compare themselves to the loudest version of success online. But being ahead financially often looks quieter than people expect. It looks like margin. It looks like patience. It looks like boring habits that don't impress anybody, but quietly change your future. So if you saw yourself in even a few of these signs, that's worth taking seriously, because you may be doing better than you think. If this gave you something useful to think about, subscribe. It genuinely helps, and it keeps this kind of content coming. And in the comments, tell me this. Which one of these signs do you think matters most now that you've actually sat with it?